It started, let's see. All right, yeah, let's roll with it. So this is the virtual brown bag. We're just getting started, and I'm lazy today. We're gonna skip the little intro, and we're gonna hit the ground running. And so, yeah, George, you were mentioning about the leveling. That's definitely a topic
Yeah.
I'm very interested in because it's a question that always comes up at different companies, different clients. So, what's your take on it? What's the story?
Yeah. So it's weird. I'm not like super experienced with the concept because where I came from, contracting world, we didn't. Well, okay, contract the three contracting companies in a row that I worked at didn't have a concept of leveling. It was just like, hey, we only hire senior developers and we'll place you with a client, and over time, if we're getting really really good results, we're gonna trust you more with clients. But there wasn't an explicit concept of it. um, and like moving over into more product development world, I'm aware there's contracting companies that do that too. I just never ran into it. Like we're now within a structure where everyone's in a level, right? And they use the Redford scale, so it's L1 through L6. And it's a very weird concept to me that's for me that's relatively poorly defined. It's interesting, but at the same time, like I kind of doubt the point of it, right? Because if you talk to people, it's like, well, yeah, it's salary bands, but it's not just salary bands. You can be in a salary band, and there's like levels of responsibility, but those are kind of fuzzy. And then so like the if you keep drilling down, like the answer you get a lot of the times is like, well, the point of this is so you can like promote people and they feel like they're getting promoted, right? Because getting promoted feels good. And like, is that really like something that people value so highly? I guess that's just me. Like, I've never been in a situation where I felt like that, like the title mattered that much.
We're on
I
the
don't
same
know.
boat there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're definitely on the same boat there. I've personally never cared about titles, roles, promotions, so to say. I've always like personally cared about, okay, am I being valued for what I bring to the table? Now, what role you want to snap on my business card, whatever, right? I don't really care. I just want to do what I want to do well, and hopefully it's the things that I really enjoy doing it, and then call it whatever you want.
Mhm.
But that's me. Like, and as you just said, it seems like it resonates with you too. But I know there's a lot of folks that they do need to see those levels. They do need to see, like, okay, what boxes do I need to check to get promoted to the next step?
Mhm.
Which for me, it's a hard thing to relate because I don't see the world in that way at all. I wonder the other guys on the call, what's your guys' take on it? How do you guys feel about it?
Yeah.
Let me see. Ryan's here, Tony, John.
Yeah. Have y'all had to do the exercise where you're determining someone's level or figuring out if two people are actually the same level or whatnot?
I was going to say it's definitely kind of a gamification kind of thing of the work environment. I think though, if you're a new hire and you come into a company, you kind of want to know what's expected of you to do, and you want to know where you can actually go with the company, right? Um, and that's difficult because nobody can see the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. Like, is this a good way to even relate that information though? Because I mean, if you're saying like what your expectations are, well, those should probably be explicit or stated anyway. That's something like your manager should be able to tell you at any given point in time. And I'm not sure how levels relate to that because you're gonna, people's responsibilities are different, and levels are more like about like the level at which they expect you to work or the level of independence you have. I don't know. When I read the leveling charts, it's a lot of bullet points for stuff that could be just like said in a sentence. I feel
Mm.
like. I don't know. Yeah.
You've also
But
got,
I think you're right. That it's a gamification, and that's one of the things that kind of feels a little dirty. But that's also because I've never responded much to gamification stuff.
the other thing is it's also a legal kind of thing too, right? Um,
Hmm.
no, I say it's a legal thing. Speaking like I've worked in HR and I haven't, but it seems like something you'd hear out of HR, right?
I'm not sure. I mean, like having a job description could be a legal thing. And I guess your job description could be tied to your level, but your job description could just be tied to your job too. And it could change over time directly. Yeah, I don't know. Because the levels are vague enough. I don't know how that would be used legally at all.
Well, I think it's one of those things that to
Yeah.
where people who are you have to have some kind of reason of why people are being promoted and things like that, and I think that gives some kind of concrete framework that you can actually move somebody up. Because I think if you bring a developer in and you just say, hey, I want you to be a developer, right? And here's your desk. And, you know, I don't know very many people who would find that the prospect of, okay, you're a developer, you wait, you work, you sit in this cube and you work on projects that we send your way until you quit or you die. And I don't know of anybody who finds that to be uh, motivational, honestly.
I mean, I wouldn't put it that way, but like, I mean,
Well,
no, honestly, and again, for me, because and fully acknowledging that I'm probably like an exception, but like to me, like you're getting paid well. Here's work that you get to do to hone your craft and to practice and to grow, and it's basically a venue to grow individually and get work done and feel fulfilled from that. That's what I'm looking for. Great. Um, I don't know. Yeah, like that. That's how I would frame that exact same thing, right? So I'm wondering if it's more an issue of framing than anything else.
well, I mean that's kind of what you're doing, right? You got this group of developers, figure out who, you know, establish some kind of hierarchy to that group, and because that's essentially what you're doing, right? You're kind of stack ranking everybody. You've got your pipe hitters, your really good people on one end, and you got the people that are maybe not quite cutting it on the other end, kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't
But
know. It could
ultimately,
also
that feedback ends up being individualized anyway and specific to your job description. And and yeah, I mean, like maybe the levels could be just be like, hey, here's the guidelines and what we expect you to be doing in certain things at certain points in time. And if that's the case, maybe we shouldn't be fretting about levels so much, right? Or we should be, you know, it would be fine for someone to come in without a level, and then you figure out after a year, what their responsibilities are that you expect for them or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
I think
Maybe we could
I think
move on to that concept because it seems like we don't have a ton to say about it.
It is. It can be pretty subjective
Mm-hmm.
at times because it's like there is the levels based on like technical prowess, right? It's like what is the minimum bar that we have at each one of those levels as far as like technical skills. But then, of course, just being like a badass, Java developer or C Sharp developer, that's just one aspect of being a consultant. If that's what you are joining the company in as, right? As are you joining as a consultant or as a developer, for a client? So expectations might vary there, and I guess so do the levels. And then after a certain point, it's like, okay, we've established that, if you know this much about the technical stuff, you may be like a junior or an associate, whatever people call those. Once pass a certain threshold where you can like get certain things implemented, given some direction, that's another level. And then another level is you don't really need any kind of like hand holding. As soon as you see the requirements, you can roll and run with it yourself. That's another level. And then from there it's like, okay, you can get things done, and not only do you do the right things right, you also empower others to also grow themselves. So that's another level as well. And then finding what are the boundaries in these levels. I feel that's where pretty much everybody has trouble, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once we're over do you understand what garbage collection is in .NET? Okay, at what level do you make that mandatory, right? At what level it's a nice to have. Maybe the guy has been working in .NET for 2 years, he uses it, he does not quite fully comprehend garbage collection, but yeah, at that level it's totally fine. Right? But then going beyond that is like, okay, now what about like the people skills, the consulting skills? How do you gauge level there when it's a little more subjective, right?
And I think that, like, even if you're keying off of, well, can they get a project done, it's still pretty subjective. We're not doing so many projects. You're not doing so many projects over your career
Yeah.
that you can be absolutely certain you nailed that estimate. Because it could be that you had a bunch of failures at a project, and it really is just because luck of the draw. There were extraneous circumstances that caused those particular projects to fail.
Yeah.
As opposed to anything you did, and in a different scenario, you would have been great and just as good as the person that's got stellar reviews. So it is hard. It's not that it's completely without
Yeah.
hope to think about, or useless to think about things that way. But it is important to keep that in perspective.
Right. Ooh.
All
Yeah.
right.
Good food for thought.
Yep. Anyway, yeah. I mean, I know a lot of times people are looking at this in terms of like, okay, improvement, right? Well, what do you? Well, I'm here. I'm at a junior developer. What do I need to do to get to mid-level developer, right? Or senior developer, which the answer is like you need to go somewhere. You need to get hired as a senior developer.
Mm.
Um, but I mean, like it is in some way a tableau for having that conversation, right? Well, what do I need to do to kind of get to the next level? Well, okay, I'd like to see you do this, 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 and this. It's just, and that's what happens in like one-on-ones and mentoring sessions. And I guess like the levels could be how that is being communicated out to management higher up, so they're aware of it. It just seems like a weird proxy that doesn't quite get at what people want.
Mm.
Maybe it's just the best we have.
It's funny. This morning,
Mm-hmm.
I had a meeting with a friend where we talked about like coaching experiences and things like that. And I mentioned that I've recently read this book called "Help Them Grow" or "Watch Them Go." And along the book comes a card deck with what they call like powerful questions,
Mm-hmm.
so that when you have these like one-on-one with people that you are coaching, there's a set of questions that will engage uh, people into the discussion, like looking for, okay, what is important to this person, how can I help this person grow, right? And should there be opportunities at our company, okay, based on where you want to go with your life in general, right? These are opportunities that we have, and let's try to make them match. So I enjoyed that approach. I just got, like, I read the book 2 months ago. I got the cards 2 weeks ago or 1 week ago, and I'm gonna start using it just as, like, okay, let's put that to practice, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, oh, are you the only one with the camera?
Yeah. Am I the only one with camera on? Come on, guys.
Oh, mine is not on. That's
Yeah.
what the heck.
Um,
Huh.
Ryan did post in the chat just before the session started. John, if you're there, he was asking you to kind of do a recap of your presentation. I know you kind of talked about it a little bit. Maybe John's not there. Okay.
Right. Yeah, I don't know what happened to my camera before.
All right. Well, maybe when John gets back, we can have that. We could have that conversation. Oh, different John. Okay. Well, if this John wants to jump on, if anyone has a topic in general they want to bring up, anything they've been playing with, working on, want to ask questions about, by all means, just turn on your mic and ask. I've got a couple other things I could bring up, but I'd love to hear from someone other than myself or Claudio.
That's right. Mhm.
Or not.
I guess
Okay.
maybe folks just like our voices and different accents.
Hey,
Yeah, it's just what they listen to during lunch.
Right.
so I got a question for you. So the company I'm currently working for, it's the the bulk of the company is remote, right? So you have all those managerial issues that come with working for a remote company. One of the things that we're doing is we're using a website called well, it's not really about the website. It's we basically have one-on-ones that we do with our manager every other week. And I'm sorry, they're not a manager, they're a chapter lead. And at the end of every week on a Friday, you have to put in basically what you did for the week, right? So there's an actual form that you go through. It's almost like a survey, right? Tell us what you focused on this week. Tell us what you're focusing on, what you think you're going to be working on the next week. And then some other.
In terms of like personal growth. Like, are you saying like I worked on this ticket and did this feature, or are you saying like I worked on like learning how to do X, Y, Z?
Well, that's kind of the question, right? Is what you put in there, right? Because the first few of those I did was just basically onboarding to the company. Next week, I'm onboarding to the squad I'm working on. I started just going through and kind of like trying to keep like a day book, right, of everything I'm working on, right? So everything I'm working on, anything I'm looking at that's interesting, that's not necessarily work related, but has some kind of tie in back to work at some place. So I put all that stuff into basically like a day book, and then when the Friday rolls around, I copy and paste that in there, right? So there's this big chunk of text that ends up in there, and I don't know. Does that sound like that's the right way to do that kind of thing? To try and over communicate what you're actually doing and that kind of thing, or are you just kind of?
How does that for who reads that feedback?
So apparently, it's my manager and any manager above him.
Sounds like you should ask them what's useful for them.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask that, before asking what should you put there, ask why is
Yeah.
that relevant? How is that useful to whoever uses that information? Because that way you can frame, okay, if this is what they want to get out of it, I understand their motives and purpose. Okay, these are the things I should be putting there in the format. Because should it be like a you know a bulleted list, or should it be like a more descriptive thing. Why is it? Unless you know why, until you know why, you shouldn't. I mean, there's no right answer for that.
I will say. So you say you have these meetings every other day. Is that right?
No, no, no.
Every
It's
other
not
week.
every. It's every other week.
Okay. So if it's every other week, then they probably have a significant amount of people that they're doing this with. Which means that when they're meeting with you, they're reading 2 weeks worth of it from you.
But
So the question is, one of the first questions I would ask the manager when bringing up this conversation is, should I be writing a lot less stuff in order to
yeah,
help you find the most important stuff to focus on and talk about?
yeah. Uh, so last week in the update I put together, I asked that question kind of thing, and I got back from the chapter lead. Said there is no right or wrong. You don't have to, but maybe worth trying to see if it helps. So it's really kind of open ended, I guess.
Yeah, I would try reframing it rather than like what's the right way to do it? How should I be doing it? It's what is helpful to you. How would you prefer to see it? Right. I wouldn't even frame it as how would you prefer to see it. It's what is helpful for them. Because I mean, you're not
Yeah,
doing it for your own sake. You're doing it for their sake. It's supposed to facilitate that conversation.
right.
So what will help you? What will help you facilitate this conversation better? Right. I assume you don't want to get me to write a novel. I assume you don't want me to put 3 words in here. I assume there's certain things that you like to focus on. Let's just make that part of of the conversation.
Yeah,
Uh, you know, it, I know for me, like it is helpful for my one-on-ones if like the people, if so when I'm running or rolling around to my one-on-ones, I do one-on-ones with everyone under me every single week, about an hour for each person, and when I roll around to it, like I usually don't have anything that I need to talk about with them, and the first like few minutes is like gathering my thoughts, and eventually, okay, I figure out some bullet points that we and things we want to address. So it is very helpful when there is kind of a document and they've gone in like put in some bullet points of what they want to talk about, and we can power through. So maybe something like that would be good.
yeah. Well, it's a conversation I need to have on my end, but I was just curious how many other people were doing something similar to that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Do you do one-on-ones, Claudia?
Heck yeah.
Like how many different people are you doing one-on-ones with?
So I have 6 direct reports. I get with them once a month uh,
Mm-hmm.
for like a 1 hour, one-on-one to go over things. But I also made myself available like whenever if there's something that comes up and they need guidance or help with anything, just they know how to find. But
So what sort of stuff are you focusing on in your one-on-ones? Are you focusing on like work-related stuff or pairing or career or like how do you do work on your career? What sort of stuff are you talking to people about?
so my goal is to help them grow, not just like with work related stuff, right? I try to see life as a whole, like we were talking last week, like no work life balance. There's just life. And then I get in the conversations, I try to get from them, what are the things that they're passionate about? Why are they passionate about those things? It does not have to be just work related. It can be anything that gets them going. Because then from there, I can start like drawing
Mm-hmm.
parallels and say, okay, if you like doing that in your personal life, there's a way you can leverage that in your work life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether like maybe it's networking skills, maybe it's like business development skills that the person has that they're not even aware of that can be leveraged in the workspace, for example. So I try to identify those, and from a coworker, I've learned, to try to see things from 3 different angles. One is in the person's life. Like, is there anything that we can do to help them grow, just as a person? um, in the client, like how can this person do an even better job at the client, and how can they bring something back to improving as a company, right? So like framing things into these three different areas, it's like a huge win-win, right? You keep the person happy, you keep the client happy, and you keep improving happy. So that's how I direct my conversations. Like, let's just have a conversation, and based on the things that they tell me, it's like, okay, let's focus on this. Okay, let's focus on this other thing. Right.
Do you find that a lot of the times when people want to talk to you, it is work related stuff, or most of the time they're like just because a lot of times with my one-on-ones, people are like, yeah, what I'd like to do is like pair on this thing that I'm dealing with.
Right.
Is that your experience as well, or like do you usually guide the conversation away from that?
I really try to make it for the like a really pleasant 1 hour conversation, because sometimes like some folks are working at the client,
Mm-hmm.
100% of the time, so they don't get to interact much with the rest of us back in the office. So that's a good way to remind people, hey, look, you're really not like an employee of the client, you're an improver. So you matter to us as a person. Let's have the conversation from that level. On the beginning, when I first take on a new direct report, usually folks go more towards like the technical side of things and the work related side of things. And when I, uh, help them feel comfortable with just really having a talk as a person, and they're like, oh, we can talk about my personal goals as well. It's like, yes, by all means, let's talk about them. And the way I flip it around, I use my own experience where and last week we were talking about hobbies and stuff, right? Because a lot of folks know, oh yeah, Claudio is like making music. He's riding his motorcycle at the racetrack, and he's doing client work, and he's doing work, for other improvers. How does that all happen? So I tell them, look, it's because I try to see life as a whole. So I have a general idea as to where I want to go with my life, and then I try to identify opportunities where, well, if I take on this hobby here, is there anything that I can learn from there and reapply to my daily job? And vice versa. Are there things from my current job that I can apply to my personal endeavors? The more I find of that, the more the values stack up. So I relate these things to them. It's like, yeah, if you're normally interacting with me in a work fashion, and then you are pointing, things that you perceive that I do well, then I tell them, oh, look, these things here, it came from personal things that I do. So it's important to me to grow those personal things because it surfaces in the work environment and vice versa. So I really, and like some folks I interact with, they are at that level where they're mostly interested in the technical side of things. They're trying to develop those things, which it was like Claudio 20 years ago. Oh, there's a new version of C sharp. Yay, that's awesome, right? Nowadays it's like, oh, there's a new version of C sharp. Yeah, whatever, right? But it's just recognizing those phases. So that's what I try to do with each one. It's like, let me understand where they are in their journey, and let's see how I can help them, drawing from my own experiences. And sometimes it's like, oh man, I haven't run into this situation before. Then I go look for my mentors and do my own research to see, okay, how to best help this person going through this kind of path in their journey.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the sort of stuff that I need to get better at. Like I'm reading Radical Candor right now, and they're talking about like okay, like the two things she's talking about two things that like you need to do really well for a manager. You need to give like good direct feedback, which like sure direct feedback I'll give all day long, and then she's like you got to like build up personal like relationships with your people that go beyond the professional, and that I really struggle with. I've always, I mean, I don't struggle with it, but like I have good relationship with people and I build them up, but I don't. it's always like around a scenario. Like here's a situation we're in. We have a relationship that's rooted in the fact that we're roommates, or rooted in the fact that we go to college together, or we're in the same club, or stuff like that. And then I almost, it's just the way I interact with people, where like I very rarely go out into having those conversations that are around that topic. Um, Not because like I'm interested or anything like that. It's just like I don't even know why. Like I just don't. Like I'll share stuff about myself all the time, but if other person doesn't, I don't want them to I don't want to pressure them to, or I don't know. I need to ask directly, I guess. Um, I really need to do better than that, because like a lot of the time I'll be like, I have had a relationship with this person, a good relationship for years, and I don't know how many kids they have, like stuff like that. I think the number is some. Like, yeah.
Well, and
Mm-hmm.
I've been in situations like that where, yeah, I don't know how many kids that person has, because every time we had conversations, we actually focused on other things,
Mm-hmm.
still not necessarily work related. It's just that we managed to find something that we're both passionate about, that we could have a conversation, and then we locked into those things. So that's what I've been very like trying to be very aware of, like trying to find these things where I can somehow connect with that person, whatever that thing is, so
Mm-hmm.
that whenever I'm trying to like deliver a message to that person, I can meet them where they are. Like a few months ago, I had a call with a friend, and as I was trying to explain some things to her, I used the soccer analogy. When I was done, she said, "Well, it's funny that you use soccer as an analogy, because you've mentioned so many times that even though you're a Brazilian, you're not much into soccer." I said, "Yes, I'm not, but I know that you are." Right? And then she's like, "Oh," because that was my thing. It's like, I know she's into soccer, so I know that it's going to be very easy for me to deliver that message if I meet her where she is. The same thing
Mm-hmm.
with me. Like, I make everybody aware that, look, American football, you can talk about it all day. It will never resonate with me, right? I don't care. I don't know. I don't understand. And I'm not ever going to learn about it because it doesn't resonate with me. So as anytime that I'm reading a book and people start like dropping American football analogies, I'm like, you've lost me right there, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've completely lost me. I'm skipping that part because it's not resonating with me. So finding the things in others that
Mm-hmm.
they understand, so that I can then use those to communicate with them, that's been a very interesting practice, and I've been collecting like good, harvesting some goods out of it.
Cool. All right.
Cool.
Anyone have anything else they want to bring up? Any questions? All right. Um, I I've got a thing that I can run through, that people here might be interested in. So I'm in the functional programming Slack, and there is an architecture channel there. Can y'all see my screen? Yeah, there we go.
So
And
yeah.
someone asked this question. They posted a challenge, an architecture challenge, that I think this is a good one. I think, and I'll I'll talk through it, and then like let's talk about it, and I kind of talk about like how I think about it, and I'll show what I did. Um, so here's the question: He's building a service where users are uploading zip files of unbounded size. The zip files might have other zip files inside of it, like any type of nesting. Basically, what you're doing is you're displaying a tree of everything that's in there, letting them pick certain files that are in there, and then those get sent off somewhere for processing or something like that. How are we going around architecting such a system? What are some ways that you think about it? What is the process that you go through? Um, Anyone have thoughts? Claudio? I'm sure you do.
Yeah, trying to make sure I understand. So that's to upload. So we're saying that we want to upload only certain files within that zip. So we don't want to like upload the whole thing and then let the user pick.
So this is a file. It's a zip file. It's got other stuff inside of it, right? That could include other zip files. The user interaction is first of all that they upload it, right? It displays a tree of all the stuff that's in there. They select certain parts of the tree, and then those things get sent off somewhere for processing. That part is left unspecified, but the point of this is basically to select and extract parts of those files, parts of this zip file.
Okay, I'm reading down where it
Yeah.
says about not you need to not waste resources.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think anyone ever tells you to waste resources, right?
Well, also, but then again, that's why I asked, is the user uploading that one big gigantic file and then making the selection, or are we making the selection on the client and then only uploading what the user actually wants to send out?
Unspecified in this program. And that's cool that you said that, because that was one of the directions that I ended up going with it too. Nobody else did.
Huh.
Talking through this, uh,
Yeah,
but yeah, unspecified. There was a later specification that we can get into, but I want to talk about the program as is.
hmm.
So how do you think about it? How do you think about just in general giving advice for this, doing architecture for this stuff?
Well, before even thinking of architecture, I would talk to the business to say, okay, if you're saying we don't want to waste resources, then we don't want to upload the file as it is, making the user wait all of that time to upload potentially a huge file that they may only want to pick, 3 or 4 files out of it once it makes out to the server. So there's a lot of wasted resource there and the waste of time, right, from the user's perspective, as opposed to just like showing to the user, okay, I found the following files within the thing. What do you want to actually upload? And
Mm-hmm.
then we upload those things.
Mm-hmm.
Cuts on the resources, cuts on the time that the user spends, like waiting for something to go up and then show a tree of what it found. I would start there.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. So you're having that conversation about what do you mean by not wasting resources? You're saying.
Yeah, resources and time, right? So
Mm-hmm.
resources as in, well, you have a 100 gig zip file
Mm-hmm.
that the guy only want to pull like 10 megs of text files out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why are we uploading the whole 100 gigs?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one kind of resource. The other one is just the user's time, because how long does it take to upload that 100 gig file until it makes up to the server, and then it shows a list of files to the user. Say, okay, which ones do you need to send out to processing? You know,
Mm-hmm.
like cut on that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, yeah. I think that's a good place to start. I also kind of focused a little bit on the resources thing, um, for a subtly different reason.
Okay.
So so first of all, kind of, I've talked about this before. I've been leaning a lot more into like practicing my volatility decomposition stuff lately.
Okay.
And when I say volatility decomposition, what I mean by that is that I've read like a little bit, like a chapter on how to do it, and then went, yeah, okay, I get it. I'm gonna just practice it, right? I actually I am aware that there is more to that. There's a lot to the field, and I'm at the point where I'm kind of like feeling it a lot of it out on my own rather than going into reading the reading what other people do. Um, but the idea here is that you want to encapsulate all the things that are going to change ever at any point. Like this was the way of thinking about it that I found really helpful, is like, if at some you're going to identify the components, each component encapsulates things that are going to change, and if at some point in the future a requirement comes in that forces you to redraw your components, then you failed at architecting the components in the best way, because what the entire point is to foresee change.
Okay.
So it's a hardcore assessment way of thinking about it, but it is helpful for me as a way of thinking about it.
Okay.
So first place I kind of started to think about is like, okay, well, uploads. So the unbounded size. Well, if something is unbounded, if it's truly unbounded, then I mean, you're not just going to be. You need to spend some of your resources on it either way. You're not going to be giving away your resources for free with no bounds. So there has to be some sort of billing / rating / usage quota system, right? And very, very easy to see that evolving on its own. It needs to be able to do things like, for a particular user, issue a policy on what sort of stuff they can do, for how long, when you have to check in and get a new policy, and so on, right? Has to be able to do that in a way that can't be forged. So that's okay. Usage billing is a component. We've already said the word user, so that presupposes we're going to have users and identity. Let's throw that a component. We'll go ahead and take a shortcut and say that includes like things like authentication, user management, all that stuff. Though realistically, a lot of that can break out into its own component. Mm-hmm. Okay. So now you have the ability to do usage billing and rating and users. And with those kind of building blocks in hand, let's look at the next part that we need. Okay, we need this asset reader, right? We need this way to read this zip file. I'm going to back away from it being specifically a zip file because that sounds really specific. Let's call it an asset. We need some way to read it and identify what's inside of it. Upload it, read it. Again, I think I clued in on the same exact thing that you did, where there's an assumption that you're uploading. Let's break that assumption because that's not explicitly stated. So what if it is a client-side application where there's an asset reader component which just determines how to read this thing, and it can stream, and it proposes and it has an interface where it can stream that information out over a common messaging system. Then you have another component that's going to be using that stream and is just in charge of selecting points of interest. So how that's implemented is, you're going to show a UI with a selector, but you're going to be identifying points of interest in that stream of stuff. First run at that. Let's also throw that on the client if we're doing the other thing on the client, right? That makes it easy. And then once you have the points of interest identified, you can have another component that's talking to your asset reader stream and taking stuff from the posted reader, and that's going to be your asset processing, which might be shipping it off to be uploaded somewhere, or doing something as simple as doing some metrics on each one and like spitting them out to the screen, right? Mm-hmm. So I think those components identify, kind of capture that. You could probably knock those out pretty quickly and then spend the rest of the time figuring out like a really good messaging system that works for this, right? For how all this communication happens. So then I put that out there. I put that out there, wrote that up. This guy kind of wrote in that okay, he didn't really specify, but he's concerned about doing stuff on the client because some people have low-powered machines, and for some people the asset itself is not really local. It's in Google Drive, or it's in Dropbox, or it's in Azure or something, or it's in Office 365 or something like that. So that and that's interesting. I'm really glad like that conversation ended up going like that way, because what that means is like if we did the volatility decomposition correctly, then we should be able to support all those requirements without actually redrawing any of those components.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing that I come up with that, all right, well, the asset reader we implement as something beyond the client, it doesn't really have to be, right? It probably shouldn't be all the way on the CS Central server, though. It probably should be somewhere on the edge of the network close to the user. And in fact, if you're talking about a lot of, and for people who do have strong, powerful machines, they can get a different instance of the asset reader that does do things similarly. If you are doing stuff in Office 365, or for example, you should probably have an instance in Azure because that's their network. It's right there.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing stuff, if you for people who are using G Cloud, you should have an instance up in G Cloud, right? Because it's their instance right there. Um, and so I think again from having that discussion, I think I actually kind of got that correctly, um, because again, you can make that adjustment without changing any of those components. And at least for me, I can kind of see in my mind's eye how those components evolve over periods of time, and one component can evolve without affecting another one.
Hmm. Okay.
So, so yeah, I've been really, really, really happy with the outcome of thinking about stuff like this. I've been trying to think about things like this for about a year and a half now, and I feel like it's producing decent, pretty good results and pretty good decompositions. I don't know. What are your thoughts or other people's thoughts? We could try throwing some more requirement changes at the system and see how it evolves. Just make
Yeah.
stuff up.
So I do have some considerations with notes I've been taking
Yeah.
as you were talking, but anybody else would like to jump in and
Yeah.
contribute to the conversation? That would be awesome.
Please.
Mm-hmm. Maybe everybody's still chewing.
Yep.
All right, no problem. I mean, guys, feel free to jump in whenever you feel like. Otherwise, we just keep chatting away. But yeah, some things. So yeah, thinking of the components to build and the things that we know for sure. It's like, okay, maybe like you said, we are not supporting just zip files. Maybe we want to support any kind of compressed files, zip, rar, whatever. So maybe that's something we should take into account. Have different strategies, the different ways that these assets may come in. Okay, cool. Another thing is, okay, once we have the content of those files, we need to display them somehow. We need a tree kind of component to display that. Not only do we want to display what's in there, but we may want to go into a selection mode to allow the user to pick and choose what they want. When we get to that mode, are we allowing the user to only pick individual files, or we can say, well, there's this one folder here. We want to allow the user to select the folder and then it selects everything underneath it. I don't know. Are those scenarios? I
Yeah,
noticed.
that's interesting. Hold on. So before we move, so what I explicitly, I don't think I showed it, but what I explicitly was thinking, like, okay, so if you have that in a component, points of interest component, it doesn't have to know about directories. It doesn't have to know about files. It doesn't even have to know about tree structures. All it has to know is that there's a graph coming to it. It's being streamed to it, and you need to display it to someone in such a way that they can identify points of interest on the graph, right? If that graph happens to be a tree, that's a good way of displaying it. But you could certainly change that whole thing to support symlinks where it's not really just a DAG. It could be all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I noticed there that on that blurb you've put up there that talks about uploading the file and then allowing the user to select and either like download certain files and or send it over for further processing. So it's like, okay, wait a minute. Why would the user upload a big zip file and then select some files to download it? So which gets me thinking, it's like, okay, what are some cases I could see that happening? So I've worked on a software for an attorney's office where that could be conceivable, where one of their, it's an immigration office, and they are always receiving like zip files with immigrants' documentations, like passport IDs, like passports and birth, certificates and things like that. So I could see them, okay, the consultant just received one zip file from that one client with all of these files. They upload it into their system. It's processed. Now they want to select, oh, I need their passport. Oh, it's in that file. Let me pick just the passport and download just that one file. So that's a valid, it's a business case. Like from a business, this is how that business would use that feature, which makes which brings me to the question, is this like a generic type of upload download system, or is it specifically built for a business that has a specific need? That would
Yeah.
change the dynamic there.
Yeah. I I don't know. I would almost challenge that, where I think that that presenting that information and choosing which parts of that file like are to be processed. I would almost say, like, in all but the simplest situations, you probably want to do that without necessarily knowing what happens to the remainder. Like knowing what happens to the files as a result would. I'm having trouble thinking of answers to that question that would influence the design of how you read that information, present it, right? And present it to them for selection, right? Whether they download it or send it off to a task queue, or just find out the file size of those file subfiles, or open up the images in a browser. Like, the selection would, well, actually I say that, but that's not quite true, because if, let's say, it is an image file, then you would want to show it in a different way, right?
Right.
So reasonably, you could have like there might be some of the things that would be like, okay, well, what we really need to do is, rather than showing it as files, show it as a document preview mode or something like that. That's probably can be accommodated well with my design, but that's something worth thinking about. Once you kind of get like, okay, well, that business reason does matter for that, and did we decompose that properly, or maybe do we need to actually do another decomposition that just determines how exactly a sub asset is presented to the user, right? And that's isolated. That has a defined interface to the world, whether you show it as just the name or you do something more complex.
Yes.
So that's an interesting idea. I like that thought.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it again, it makes me go back to, okay, when people are trying to use this, what is the state of the world? What are they exactly looking for? Where are they? Are they using their powerful desktop machine to see that, or are they like at some courthouse with their phone trying to look up an immigrant's passport and they just need to see something there, right? And then accounting for that, maybe they don't need to download anything; they just need to see it quickly to make a decision, right? That's why an example that I've been bringing up a lot is somebody asked me, okay, can you build me a calculator? Like, okay, what operations? Well, like addition. We give it two numbers and it gives you the result. Okay, that's very easy. I'll build that really quickly. And then the person comes back later and says, oh, it's not quite working for me. Well, why not? Well, it's because the two things that I'm adding are, for instance, money. I'm adding American dollars to Brazilian reals, or I'm adding, kilos to pounds, Well, now it's not just a simple calculator. It's still you're adding things to one another, but the meaning of that data changes. So the same thing, okay, it's a file upload system. Well, that's just your generic calculator. How is it really used for the business?
Mm-hmm.
That's where, and I've been like shifting my conversations a lot more to that side of the equation, because once I get good answers there, then I can think about the architecture and the implementation patterns for the thing that we are building. Once I know how is it going to be used.
See. I would almost go say. So I'm kind of repeating myself there. As like, ideally, you want to design a system where where any reasonable answer to that question, it's componentized in such a way where where a change in an answer to that question only requires a change in one place that is completely isolated from all the other components.
Sure.
So yeah, so you designed a system where, okay, it was adding two numbers. Now they're saying, well, it's adding money, right? There should be only one place that needs to change as a result of that. Or they say, or later on they come say, well, it's money, but it should be money at the current exchange rate, right? It shouldn't be hard coded. So now now you're probably doing a service call. Well,
Yeah.
that means that the interface has to be asynchronous and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah, they come back later and it's like, yeah, but it's got to be configurable and stuff like that. And not everyone can query that service. That has to be behind an API key and things like that. And again, rate limited. So again, are you designing things in such a way that as these things get tacked on, as these major changes are happening, are they isolated
Gotcha.
and not rippling through the system?
Yep.
And that's what makes it successful as a design.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
Because a lot of the times, realistically, having those conversations about how exactly it's used, especially in like product development, that will change. Requirements will change,
oh
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. But yeah, having that conversation, at least you identify from the business like put areas that are likely to change. So
Mm-hmm.
you already put your frame of mind as to, okay, let me make sure that that can be swappable, if I do need to implement, either change it or implement different strategies to handle the thing. Um,
Okay.
I like
Yeah.
it. That was a good exercise. Thanks for bringing it up, man.
Yeah, that'll be fun. I gotta run, but yeah,
Okay.
it's fun. We'll do more in the future. Talk to you
Sounds
later.
good.
Bye.
All right. Talk to you later. Thanks everybody for joining in. Hope to see you back next week. Bye, guys.